Hello everyone and welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. My name is Simon Olney, I'm a professional triathlon coach. And before I kick this week's episode off, I wanted to let you know I've just released an education app called Phase on Triathlon. Named after my business, that's Phazon. And unless you're driving, head to the App Store right now or the Google Play Store. Search Phase on Triathlon, you download that and you get a free course that looks at what it is we should be eating before and after exercise. Okay, it's a really good resource to put together, completely free. You do need to create an account so you can track your progress through it, but not only get that course, you also get a few other older free courses in there as well that I've put together. There's a lot of information out there within the app that I think you'll really enjoy. So if you head to the App Store now, that's Phase on Triathlon, give that a download. I'd really appreciate that, and I think you'll be able to get yourself some fantastic nutrition advice to boot. Now, what I wanted to talk about this week was late season triathlons. Now, when I've been taking the dog out in the morning recently, there's definitely been a bit of a chill in the air, okay? Autumn's coming, it's late August, and, thankfully, if you ask me, the average temperatures are starting to drop a little bit. But this does bring with it a series of challenges, not only due to the weather, but also the time of the year. Now, I know that looking at the statistics, about 2/3 of the listeners here are based in the UK. And it has to be said that September really does signal the end of the triathlon season in the UK. By the time we get to late September, there are very few events going on. There might be a couple of pool-based ones in early October, but realistically, we are coming to the autumn of the triathlon season, you could say. You see what I did there? And we need to change our approach based on this. We can't just turn up to events in the same way that we did in the summer. And again, the timing of the year does have a real impact on this. Now, at this point in the year, most of us will have done our A races. If you have got a big Ironman coming up, such as Ironman Wales, it may be that you've yet to hit your peak. But many of us, we had our sort of A races around sort of June, July, really, are the 2 months where sort of a lot of people are targeting the really big events. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. But what that means is that by the time we get to sort of August and September, I mean, if we were training for an Ironman or any race that we wanted to really excel at, we're going to be looking at starting our training around about 6 months out in most cases. So if you had an A race in June, you probably would have started December, January. That's 8 months ago. And if you've been training hard for 8 months, that's pretty difficult. That's pretty hard. To be able to maintain that level of momentum, to be able to maintain that level of motivation as well over such a long period. And once you've completed your A race, you think, right, that's it, I've achieved my goals. But I also want to make the most of the fitness that I have, which is only natural. It can be really challenging to be able to go, okay, right, well, let's keep pushing hard. Let's, really make sure I finish the season off strong. I remember when even in my first couple of years of triathlon, when I was, super motivated to do as many races as I can, I remember, I had it in my head, I might do the Hever Castle Triathlon. And I was driving down the motorway and I saw a sign where the next junction was Hever Castle. I thought, I might be doing that triathlon there in a few weeks. But I just thought to myself, I just can't face it. I'm just not sure that I can bring myself to push that hard and to motivate myself to do what would be required to excel, that I'd be sort of doing it for the sake of it. I wouldn't be putting in an A-grade performance. I'd just be turning up and putting a race in. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it does mean that we have to change our mindset sometimes when we approach these later season races. Now, my recommendation, if you want to, make the most of the fitness that you developed with your training, if you really want to be able to excel, that you should go, okay, well, what events are around that are going to be a bit different? What have I not done before? Could be a shorter event or a local event, the kind of things that you wouldn't normally sort of target. A lot of us, we might target an overseas Ironman. That sounds to us like something really exciting. But there is an awful lot going on that is probably a lot closer to you than you realise. Again, I can't speak for different parts of the world, but in many cases, especially in Europe, there are lots of little triathlons dotted around. And you think, yeah, you know what? Like, the entry fee is reasonable. I might just turn up and I might give it a go. And it's nice to be able to support the local community, the local race directors. You don't have as much pressure on you as well. If you are peaking for a big middle distance or a big Ironman, that there's an awful lot that's resting on that day in your performance. If you spend 6 months training for an Ironman and you have a shocker, that's really hard to deal with because you have placed a lot on yourself. I mean, obviously, I hope that you go out and you have an incredible race, but plenty of people have failed to finish Ironmans that they've dedicated the last maybe year of their life working towards. Whereas when you're turning up to a local race that could be a bit shorter, well, I'll go out and I'll have some fun. I'll soak up the atmosphere. I'm not going to put pressure on myself. It's not all about performance. It's going to be as much about kind of, enjoying the scenery. Yes, I'm going to push myself. I'm going to feel good. I want to see where I'm getting my age group. But if I have an absolute shocker, then I'm still going to leave, with something approaching a smile on my face. Just because I've turned up and I've competed and I've done something that brings me joy. I also recommend you look at some slightly different events than you might normally do. If you race a lot of sprint distance and Olympic distance, you might go, oh well, what if I look at doing an aquathlon or a duathlon? I mean, they run all the way through the winter. Even running events. What can I do that's a bit different? That might just sort of like motivate me, give me a kick up the backside a little bit and go, right, okay, let's keep going. Let's keep enjoying ourselves. Let's keep ourselves fit until we do get to that end of the season. Now, due to the changes in sunrise times, you may find yourself sort of competing with lower sun than somebody who would be in midsummer. And I mean, this is mainly an issue on the swim where low sun can interfere with your sighting. And the way to get around this is to really make sure you're absolutely sure where the next buoy is rather than just sort of swimming and hoping. At big events, it's relatively simple, especially ones with few turns where you're just sort of following the feet in front. Maybe it's a smaller event where the field's a bit more spread out, then you do really need to pay attention to make sure that you are holding a straight line and you are swimming towards where you want to be. Don't just blindly follow the feet of the people in front of you, because I have seen large packs of swimmers go way off course in the past. Now on the bike, it really is important to make sure that you have some kind of eyewear or visor on your helmet, because there will be much lower sun than when somebody's racing in the summer. Now, this isn't necessarily a problem. It depends on whether somebody is likely to be wearing sunglasses anyway. I know most people do, but there are a few people who really don't get on with them, that don't want them on their face. If you are racing later in the season, you really aren't going to have much choice in it, because if you can't see where it is that you're going, not only are you going to be a greater risk to yourself if you end up accidentally hitting a pothole or a parked car that you didn't see, you'd also be a risk to other riders. So I really would recommend, assuming that, of course, it's sunny, I really would recommend that you take something with you to help combat this. Once we get onto the run, it's going to be hopefully not quite as hot as these events are in the middle of the summer. Hopefully you won't be tackling many temperatures that are much over 30 degrees. If you look at a lot of the big races out there that happen in the summer, the temperature on the run course can be absolutely brutal. I mean, running through 35, 36 degrees Celsius does not sound like my kind of fun. If you target a race that is later in the season, it just allows your body to spend less energy cooling itself, which means you've got more energy for forward momentum. Some people, the heat doesn't bother them nearly as much and they can just keep on pushing through it. They quite like it. Other people, such as myself, are going to wilt like a rose a little bit and actually be able to really perform to our absolute best at midday in July over a long, hard event is quite difficult. So having a little bit of, coolness, as it were, in the air, might be more of a breeze as well. The sunlight hopefully shouldn't be quite as intense, and you might actually be able to run faster. Of course, this can be offset by the fact that you could be later into the season, you've got a lot of fatigue accumulated, but these are just factors to consider. Speaking of temperature, the reason that the triathlon season in the UK and most of Europe ends in September is the water temperature. The water temperature really does start to drop off quite quickly this time of year. It always surprises me just how quickly it drops. Obviously, with the sea does tend to cool off slower because it's such a larger body of water. It takes a lot longer to get hotter. It only really gets to its sort of peak temperature around sort of July, August time. And most people can swim in the sea until sort of into November before it gets too cold. But lakes, which is where a lot of triathlons, at least in the UK, are held, they don't retain the heat nearly as well. And by the time that you get into early October, the issue is that the water's just that bit too cold, both, from a sort of ethical standpoint, as it were. Well, not ethical, but practical standpoint, in that not many people are going to want to be swimming in water that cold, but also British triathlon rules dictate the maximum swim distance in any given temperature. And that can have a massive impact on the sort of the races that people are able to put on. If you organise that you're putting on a half distance triathlon, but the water's so cold that the maximum you can do is 750 metres, of course, people aren't going to be happy about that. Now, swimming in cold water, I mean, I am better at it than most, which is a bit confusing given my build, but there we go. I can sort of get on with it a bit more than some other people can. However, where I get into trouble is when I come out of the water. And I'm, rather than sort of stepping out into sort of 25 degrees, something in the mid-20s, as you would do in the summer, you could be coming out the water into sort of 12 degrees air temperature. And coming out of, if the water itself is only about 13 degrees, if you're coming out into temperatures that aren't much over 10, you're not going to warm up, really, that fast. And this is a mistake that a lot of people make, is that they underestimate just how cold the bike can be as we get towards the end of the season. Now, we're triathletes. We love to optimize everything in our performance, okay? We want to have the fastest transitions we can. We want to create the least amount of drag on the bike. And as a result of this, we don't want to spend any more time in transition than we need to. And so it's quite common for people to come out of the swim, really buzzing, great swim, okay, right, get on the bike, because the bike is where a lot of people feel most confident. And they then get out there and they push through transition and they go, oh, I'm not going to bother with the gloves, they'll take ages to put on. I just want to get on the bike and get going. And you think it's cold coming out of the water and running to your bike. When you are absolutely soaking wet and the air temperature is only about 11 or 12 degrees and you're riding into the wind in nothing but, sort of what a large piece of lycra underwear, for the sake of argument, you are going to freeze. And of course, this depends on somebody's build. Some people feel the cold more than others. While I'm okay in cold water, I really do suffer on the bike in the cold more than a lot of people. You need to take this into consideration when you're thinking about the kit that you're bringing. Now, I wanted to share at this point a story from when I've been coaching for a few years. And an older gentleman engaged me and he wanted to work towards a half-distance triathlon that was in the autumn, in September. Great, okay. And, for him, I think he was in his mid-70s. He really wanted to get back into it and to achieve this big goal of his. And so we trained, built it up, obviously a lot slower than I would with a younger athlete. And we got ahead of the event. And I kept saying to him, make sure that when you get into transition that you put some extra layers on. Get yourself a gilet, some gloves, because, people who are older, they do tend to feel the cold more. They can't regulate the temperature as easily. And I kept trying to tell him to layer up for this bike because it was time well spent to make sure that he finishes. And I remember I logged into Training Peaks to see how he got on. Swim was good, and then he did one lap of the bike. And he left a comment saying hypothermia rules okay. And I remember there was an element of there's an element of disappointment, of course. You want the athletes that you work with to achieve their goals, obviously. But there's also just sort of an element of heartbreak as well. The thought that, I coach, it doesn't happen very often, but that I coach someone and they didn't achieve what they set out to achieve. Of course, the reason for this is that, he just didn't listen to my advice. He flew through transition, he thought it would be okay, and he wasn't. Now, if we think about the time that it takes to put on a set of arm warmers, a pair of gloves, a gilet, maybe even something such as sort of like a GABA jersey, something that's windproof, a bit more weatherproof, depending on the conditions. How much time is that going to lose us in transition? Okay, well, gloves aren't easy to put on wet hands. You can have a towel there so you can dry your hands off. But then when you get your hands into the gloves, that can take obviously a little bit of time. Gilet doesn't take that long to put on at all, as long as you don't sort of struggle with the zipper too much. Same with the jersey. Arm warmers can definitely be a little bit of a fiddle on wet arms, but you have to look at the big picture here. Okay, if you spend a minute more than you need to in transition, that can feel quite stressful, because you're sat there stationary while all these people are appearing, putting on their helmet and their race number and going. But the fact is, you know your body, and if you know that you're likely to get cold out there, then you need to take action. Because that minute that you lose in transition could be 5, 10, 20 minutes that you gain on the bike. If your hands are so cold that you can't change gears or use the brakes, you're going to lose an awful lot more than a minute. An awful lot more. And it really is time well spent. Even if you have enough circulation in your hands, if you are almost sort of shaking because of how cold you are, that's not conclusive to be able to race fast. And it's very hard to warm ourselves up on the bike. Now, obviously, if there is direct sunshine that is going to be hitting you as you're riding, that might be a bit different. Whenever I am racing in September, I always put my windproof gilet on. As a minimum. I don't think I've ever needed much more than that. I don't think I've ever put arm warmers on. I have put gloves on actually in the past as well. So gloves and a gilet. And I know that the pockets in my tri-suit are of a size enough that I could stick the gilet in them. The gilet would be hanging out. And it's not great for aerodynamics either. Or I'd maybe stuff it down the front of my tri-suit. But I know that if I need to take that gilet off, that I can. However, even if you only need that gilet for the first hour, then that could be the difference between you finishing or not. If you get hypothermic on that bike, it's very hard to come back from that and to be able to rally and to do well. Now, here's an interesting statistic for you. Now, those who are unfit, those who are new to the sport, or they're just not especially fast as athletes, they are very likely to DNF due to it being too hot. Okay, their bodies are just not able to keep up that level of effort in really hot temperatures. They overheat and they have to pull out. Meanwhile, faster athletes are much more likely to DNF in the cold than they are the heat. And that's a really interesting statistic when you think about it. Now, I think part of this could be an overconfidence, dare I say an arrogance in one's ability to complete an event. I think there's also an element of just wanting to optimise their transitions and not wanting to lose time getting changed. Now, I remember there was at 70.3 Weymouth, it was one of the first editions, back on Twitter before it became a hellscape. I remember there was a professional triathlete who sort of gave a little bit of a a report on why he pulled out of the race. Now, me being a bit younger at the time, I had the brass neck to ask him, did you not think to put on another layer in transition? Again, not something I do nowadays, but I did. And he came back and he said, no, you're absolutely right. I should have done. I just underestimated how cold it was going to be out there. And it's a common problem that I think a lot of people fall into. And just like spend the time in transition to get yourself warm. Because if you don't, there's a good chance that you could end up either underperforming or failing to finish for the sake of saving a few seconds in transition. Something else to consider is your pacing. Now, if you are sort of fatigued going into this race, we're talking like long-term fatigue over a long season, chances are, yes, you are going to be sort of underperforming a little bit to how you may have been performing in your A race. But also due to the temperatures being, probably slightly lower, if not much lower, then that may actually increase the amount of power that you can put out. So you really do need to use your noggin here, because on the one hand you'll be more fatigued, on the other hand you'll be cooler, so you may be capable of a superior performance. This is where it really pays to listen to your body and to be able to figure out, okay, like how much can I realistically sort of hold. Now, I once heard a good piece of advice regarding pacing, which was you need to ask yourself, is this pacing correct? Because there's so many factors over a long day that, especially on the run, it's very hard to go, this is going to be my target. You need to ask yourself, can I sustain this pace? If the answer is a yes, then you're not going hard enough. If the answer is a no, you're going too fast. If your answer is a maybe, you're probably on the right track, assuming that you are looking to set a personal best. If you're just looking to finish, then you want to answer that question with a resounding yes. If it's your first time over a distance, let's not try any heroics. Let's not do anything too hasty. But if we are racing later in the season for a bit of fun or just see what we're capable of, then we do need to sort of think about these things a little bit differently, take these different factors into account when we're pacing ourselves. Speaking of the weather, there is a higher chance of rain later in the year as well. And this is something that we may well need to learn to cope with. In fact, I've actually raced through fog before on the bike. I was very glad to have my gloves that day. You need to get used to being able to race in the rain. And the way that we do this is, we train in the rain. I think some triathletes, they can be a little bit kind of wet, as it were, pun intended. And as soon as they see a few drops of rain, they're straight indoors on the turbo trainer. But I do think that it helps build resilience, it helps build bike handling skills, that if it's, assume it's not freezing cold, if you do wake up and it's raining out there, to go, right, okay, time to learn how to ride in the rain. Yes, you're going to get wet. No, it's not going to be pleasant. But is it going to make you a more versatile athlete who's capable of a lot more? Yes. Yes, it will. Now, a lot of these tips are based on the fact that you are sort of racing in a sort of a temperate climate towards the end of a triathlon season, but you of course need to sort of keep in mind, if you are travelling for your event, a lot of people in the UK will travel over to Barcelona or Portugal in October for Ironman events over there. It is of course going to be warmer over there than it is over here at that time of year. In that sort of southern Europe area, they're normally around about sort of 6 to 8 weeks sort of behind us, as it were, with weather and the seasons at this time of year. So the weather they will have in October is the weather that we're probably experiencing here in August at the moment. So again, hopefully not oppressively hot. There will be a bit more of a sea breeze, but you do need to take this into consideration. If you are going to be racing in Barcelona, then you probably don't need to take a bunch of extra layers. Speaking of extra layers, one that I forgot to mention, and I don't think I can shoehorn it earlier into the episode, is overshoes. So if you are riding in sort of quite cold conditions, especially if it's wet or windy, you might want to look at getting some overshoes, which are a sort of fabric, often neoprene are the ones that I tend to go for. They go over the top of your shoes, and they help keep the water and the wind out. Now, I ride with Specialized road shoes. They fit my feet very well. They have a massive vent on the bottom of them to help with cooling, which means that if you are riding in cold temperatures, it lets a lot of the cold in and my feet can get really cold. So I tend to stick overshoes on, which act as a complete wind baffle help keep the rain out, help keep my feet warm. Again, they're a little bit of a fiddle in transition because you'll need to roll them down to your toes, really, if you're going to be able to get your feet in them. And then you've got to roll the overshoe round your feet and do the zip up at the back. Yeah, it is a little bit of a faff, but they can actually improve aerodynamics. I wouldn't recommend them in most cases because the aerodynamic gain is unlikely to be significant enough to offset the time you put them on. For time trialists wear them, but they don't have to get changed quickly. That is the best way to sort of protect your feet from the cold, which if you have cold hands and you have cold feet on the bike, you are going to be miserable. And there we have it. That is all about how to tackle races later in the season. Pick some that are a little bit different, something that's going to interest you and motivate you. Maybe have a different objective with less pressure on it than other events. Maybe you're just turning up for fun. And make sure whatever you do that you accommodate for the lower sun that you're going to encounter, but most importantly, the lower temperatures on the day. Thank you once again for your company. If you haven't already, make sure that you open the App Store or the Google Play Store, go download my app now and enjoy all that free exclusive content as well as an offer. Okay, I can give you 90% off of one of my courses. Cheers guys, see you soon.